The Great Pyramids of Giza, engineering beyond time. The desert stretches endlessly, a sea of shifting sands under the blazing Egyptian sun. And yet on the Giza Plateau, there rise structures that seem to defy not only the natural landscape, but also the boundaries of human ingenuity. Colossal monuments of stone that appear to whisper secrets across millennia, their sharp edges catching the light of dawn as if channeling something beyond human comprehension, as if pointing not merely to the heavens, but to truths hidden within the marrow of time itself. The Great Pyramids of Giza, especially the iconic Pyramid of Khufu, also known as the Great Pyramid, stand as enigmas carved into history. Puzzles so grand and so unfathomable that to this day they divide scholars, scientists, mystics, and dreamers. For how could a civilization 4,500 years ago, armed only with primitive copper tools and ropes, raise monuments whose alignment with the stars, whose mathematical precision, whose sheer scale seem to mock even the technologies of our own modern era? Imagine 2.3 million stone blocks, each weighing on average between 2.5 and 15 tons, stacked with such accuracy that even a razor blade cannot fit between them. Imagine the labor it would take, not just tens of thousands of men, but an entire societal effort that would have required food, shelter, coordination, astronomical knowledge, logistical mastery, and some form of engineering technique that even now engineers cannot fully reconstruct with certainty. For every modern attempt to replicate the task on a smaller scale has ended in failure, or at best, imperfect approximation. As though the ancients had access to knowledge that has since been lost, deliberately concealed, or perhaps gifted from some external source beyond our reckoning. The enigma deepens when one considers not only the construction, but the purpose. For was the Great Pyramid truly a tomb, as Orthodox Egyptology insists, or was it something far more mysterious, a machine of stone designed for functions that go beyond the resting place of a pharaoh? Perhaps an astronomical observatory, perhaps a power plant harnessing unknown energies, perhaps even a portal between the earthly realm and the divine. Hieroglyphs and records fail us here, for within the pyramid no mummies have been found, no elaborate inscriptions as in the tombs of the Valley of the Kings. No narrative of afterlife journeys or divine encounters, but instead a haunting silence, empty chambers, and shafts that stretch with impossible precision towards stars like Orion's Belt and Sirius, suggesting an astronomical alignment that was intentional, deliberate, and full of meaning lost to us now. When one stands before the pyramid, the sheer presence overwhelms, for it is not only a mountain of stone, but a riddle solidified. Its base nearly a perfect square aligned to true north within a fraction of a degree. Its height, once at 146.6 meters before erosion and theft of casing stones, its proportions encoding mathematical constants such as pi and the golden ratio, leading some to speculate that the builders possessed advanced mathematical knowledge well beyond what is credited to Old Kingdom Egypt. Knowledge perhaps inherited from a forgotten civilization, an Atlantis of the sands, whose memory lingers only in myths and the stones themselves. And yet, the mainstream narrative insists it was the work of human hands, thousands of laborers organized over decades under the command of Pharaoh Khufu's administration. But here too lies mystery, for while recent archaeological evidence has unearthed worker villages suggesting a skilled and fed labor force, the logistics of hauling multi-ton blocks across the desert, raising them to heights of 400 feet, and fitting them with millimetric precision remains almost inconceivable. As though the explanation is true in outline, but missing the key, the hidden mechanism that made it possible, the lost technique swallowed by time. What if, some ask, the stones were not dragged at all, but cast from a form of ancient geopolymer concrete, poured into molds on site, a technology rediscovered only in the 20th century? Or what if sound, resonance, or vibration was harnessed, a forgotten science of acoustic levitation, hinted at in myths of priests chanting stones into the air? Or what if the builders had some mastery of simple yet effective machinery now eroded from record? Ramps spiraling inward, counterweights of unimaginable design. Solutions so elegant we can no longer perceive them, our modern arrogance blinding us to ancient practicality. But even if the how could be explained, the why continues to elude. For the pyramid sits as part of a triad with Khafre and Menkaure, mirroring the three stars of Orion's belt, as though mapping heaven onto earth, a celestial reflection, a declaration in stone that humanity was tethered not merely to this world, but to the stars. And the placements suggest ritual, myth, a cosmology so deeply ingrained that it demanded the most enduring of monuments, yet the meaning remains slippery, elusive, like water in cupped hands. With theories ranging from resurrection machines that launch the pharaoh's soul to the afterlife, to giant clocks tracking processions of the equinox, to repositories of ancient knowledge encoded not in words but in geometry, waiting for those capable of reading them. And then comes the haunting possibility raised by alternative historians that the pyramids are far older than Egyptologists admit, not 2500 BC, but perhaps remnants of a civilization that predated the floods, predating even recorded history, survivors of cataclysmic events encoding their wisdom in stone, leaving behind monuments so durable that they would outlast memory itself. An idea supported by geological studies on the Sphinx showing erosion patterns consistent with heavy rainfall. Rainfall that would date the structures to a time when the Sahara was green, thousands of years earlier, challenging everything we think we know about the dawn of civilization, suggesting that the pyramids are not merely tombs, but time capsules, messages left across epochs to remind us of cycles we have forgotten, of knowledge we once held and then lost. What is encoded in these stones? What vibration do they carry? Why do so many who visit speak of an ineffable presence, a hum, an energy felt but not measured? And why do cultures across the globe, from the pyramids of Mesoamerica to the ziggurats of Mesopotamia, mirror this obsession with monumental triangular forms, as if echoing a lost universal language? Skeptics scoff, but the mystery remains. Not simply in the stones themselves, but in the silence they keep, a silence louder than words. One that forces us to confront not only what we do not know, but perhaps what we cannot know. For the pyramids stand as guardians of forgotten truths, engineering beyond time. Puzzles whose solution may require not only archaeology, but a re-evaluation of human history itself. A willingness to accept that we may be children of a story half erased, walking among ruins that hold the key to who we are, who we were, and who we might become, if only we dare to listen. Perhaps the ancients built these monuments not for themselves, but for us, for the distant descendants who would stand in awe and wonder, seeking answers in the desert winds, hearing the whisper of stone against eternity, the message hidden in geometry, the echo of something vast and eternal, reminding us that history is not a line, but a labyrinth, and at its center lies the enigma of the Great Pyramid, unbroken, unyielding, and unsolved. A monument that stares back at us across 4,500 years, as if asking whether we are ready, at last, to solve the riddle carved in stone beneath the eternal sun of Egypt. Stonehenge, the cosmic calendar or ritual monument. On the windswept plains of Salisbury in southern England, there rises a circle of stones that has haunted the imagination of humanity for centuries. A skeletal crown of megaliths etched against the horizon. Its silhouette familiar, yet its meaning elusive. A riddle written in granite whose solutions have always slipped just beyond reach. For Stonehenge is not merely an arrangement of rocks, but an enigma that binds astronomy, ritual, death, and myth into a puzzle that refuses to yield to certainty. And though archaeologists, astronomers, and mystics have for generations tried to pierce its secret, the monument still seems to whisper in tongues we cannot fully translate.
We look upon it and we know instinctively that this place mattered, that it was not built at random, that its stones are aligned with something far greater than mere decoration. But the purpose remains cloaked, the intention hidden, and so we are left to wonder whether we stand before a cosmic calendar, a sacred temple, a place of the dead, or some synthesis of all, or perhaps something stranger still, something we have not yet conceived. The mystery begins with the stones themselves. Blue stones brought from the Preseli Hills of Wales, nearly 150 miles away, transported by people who had no wheels, no draft animals, no metal tools as we would understand them, yet somehow managed to drag, roll, or float massive blocks across rivers, hills, and plains until they reached the chalk downland where they were planted into circular arrangements. Later capped with the massive sarsen trilithons that stand like gateways to another world, each weighing up to 25 tons, fitted with mortise and tenon joints as if carpentry had been translated into stone. Their lintels curved to create a perfect circle, precision achieved with a patience and purpose that suggest ritual significance beyond measure. And we ask why? Why this monumental effort? Why spend lifetimes hauling stones across such distances, shaping them, erecting them in patterns that echo cycles of the heavens? For when one stands within the circle at midsummer sunrise or midwinter sunset, the alignment becomes clear. The solstice sun rising over the heel-stone, the shafts of light slicing through the trilithons, a calendar not of days but of cosmic events. A clock not for hours, but for the eternal dance of sun and season. A monument that seems to bridge earth and sky, linking human lives to celestial rhythms, as though the builders sought to freeze time in stone, to hold the turning of the year in a sacred geometry where life and death, planting and harvest, rebirth and decay could be measured and honored. But if it was merely a calendar, why the scale? Why the haunting grandeur? Why the burial mounds that cluster around it? The cremated remains of the dead interred within its ditches, suggesting Stonehenge was also a necropolis, a place of ancestral reverence where the living communed with the departed, where stone and bone coexisted in ritual cycles. And yet, even this explanation falters, for the stones themselves are imbued with myth. The blue stones said in medieval legend to have been brought by Merlin the magician from Ireland. Stones of healing that could cure ailments, stones of power that linked the human to the divine. And even today, people gather there at solstice to feel something ineffable, to touch the stones in search of energy, to listen for the hum of the earth, as though the megaliths amplify unseen vibrations, tuning forks of the ancient world. Still, the questions persist. For what culture, what belief system, what cosmology birthed such a place? For Stonehenge was built not in one moment, but over centuries, layers upon layers of construction from 3000 BC to 2000 BC, a process spanning generations, meaning that those who finished it were not those who began. And thus it becomes not only a monument, but a memory, a continuation of tradition whose original intent may already have been half forgotten by its later builders. Its true meaning slipping into legend even as it was completed, leaving us to reconstruct fragments from post holes, pottery shards, and the silent testimony of stone. Theories multiply. Some see Stonehenge as an observatory, a place where the movements of sun, moon, and stars were tracked with accuracy, predicting eclipses, guiding agriculture, synchronizing human activity with cosmic rhythms. Others argue it was a temple of healing, where the sick were brought to be cured by ritual and by the magical properties of the blue stones. Others still insist it was primarily a place of the dead, a liminal zone between worlds where ancestors were honored and the journey of the soul was mapped upon the heavens. And then there are those who whisper of more fantastic possibilities, that Stonehenge was not merely terrestrial but extraterrestrial, that its alignments, its geometry, its inexplicable efforts suggest influence from beyond, visitors from the stars leaving behind markers, teaching ancient people the ways of the cosmos. Perhaps as part of a forgotten global network of megalithic sites, for when we see how Stonehenge aligns with other henges and long barrows across Britain, when we compare it with Newgrange in Ireland, with the pyramids, with other stone circles scattered across the globe, a pattern begins to emerge, as if ancient humanity was connected by a shared vision, a lost knowledge that transcended culture, a prehistoric science that we cannot yet grasp. Skeptics scoff, archaeologists debate, but the stones remain, immovable, silent, and yet insistent, pulling pilgrims and scholars alike into their orbit, daring us to unravel their mystery. And in that silence lies their power. For perhaps Stonehenge was never meant to be solved in the rational sense. Perhaps it is a riddle whose answer is not a single function, but a multiplicity. A calendar and a temple, a necropolis and a place of healing, a monument that gathered meaning with each generation, absorbing myth and ritual like layers of sediment, until it became what it is today, an enigma carved into the earth itself, a circle of stone that continues to mark time not just for the cosmos, but for humanity's own quest for meaning. For when the sun rises over the Hillstone on Midsummer's Day, when shadows stretch across the trilithons, and the air fills with the cries of those who still gather in ancient ritual, we feel for a moment what our ancestors may have felt, a shiver of belonging, of awe, of connection to something vast and timeless. And yet we also feel the absence of full understanding, the hollow where knowledge should be. The reminder that not all is meant to be known, that some mysteries endure because they are not puzzles but mirrors, reflecting our own need to find order in the cosmos, to make sense of life and death through stone and sky. Stonehenge, then, stands not only as a monument, but as a challenge, a whisper across 5,000 years that asks us whether we will ever truly understand, or whether we will forever circle it like moths around flame, fascinated, reverent, and haunted, gazing at the stones that mark both time and timelessness, both the lives of those who built it and the unknowable purpose for which it stands. An eternal question set upon the Salisbury Plain, a riddle of granite and silence that has changed history simply by refusing to yield its secret. An enigma unsolved and perhaps unsolvable. A cosmic calendar, a ritual monument, or something beyond both. Something that reminds us that history's greatest truths are often carved in mystery.
The Lost City of Atlantis, Plato's Eternal Mystery. Across the corridors of myth and memory, there echoes a tale that has refused to die, a story first written by the philosopher Plato more than 2,000 years ago. A story of a mighty civilization that rose to greatness and then vanished beneath the sea in a single night of fire and flood. A story that has haunted humanity with its allure of lost wisdom and forgotten power. The story of Atlantis. And whether it is allegory, invention, memory, or truth, remains one of the most compelling enigmas ever to stir the imagination. For when Plato spoke of Atlantis in his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, he described it not as a myth, but as history passed down through Egyptian priests to the Greek statesman Solon, who then related to his descendants until Plato, philosopher of reason and forms, committed it to writing. And in his account, Atlantis was no small fable, but a sprawling empire, an island continent larger than Libya and Asia Minor combined, lying beyond the Pillars of Heracles, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. A land of great kings, of concentric rings of water and land, of temples plated in silver and orichalcum, of ships that sailed across the seas bringing wealth and dominion. A civilization so advanced that it dazzled the imagination of even those who lived in the age of Athens and Sparta. And yet a civilization undone by its own hubris. For as Plato tells it, the Atlanteans grew greedy, warlike, seeking to conquer the Mediterranean world. But the gods grew angered, and in a single terrible day and night the island was swallowed by the sea, leaving only the memory of its greatness and the ruins buried beneath waves and time.
And ever since, seekers have scoured the earth in search of this lost land, convinced that Plato's account was not mere allegory but veiled history, a fragment of truth encoded in philosophy. And so the hunt has taken scholars, mystics, adventurers, and dreamers from the depths of the Atlantic Ocean to the Mediterranean basin, from the coasts of Spain and Morocco to the Caribbean, even to Antarctica. Each new theory spawning fascination and doubt, each discovery of a sunken ruin or ancient map rekindling the possibility that Atlantis was real. Some point to the island of Santorini, once called Thera, where a volcanic eruption around 1600 BC destroyed the flourishing Minoan civilization, raining fire and ash, generating tsunamis that devastated Crete. A catastrophe so immense it could have seeded Plato's tale centuries later. Others suggest southern Spain near Doñana National Park, where satellite imagery reveals circular patterns buried beneath marshland that resemble Plato's rings of Atlantis. Still others argue that Atlantis lies in the Azores, or in the Caribbean, or even beneath the Antarctic ice. A shifting hypothesis that reveals not certainty, but yearning, a deep hunger in humanity for the idea that somewhere, sometime, a civilization greater than our own once existed and was lost. But what if Plato was not inventing? What if his story was a memory of a civilization destroyed not in historical times, but in prehistory? A survivor's tale of a cataclysm at the end of the last ice age, when rising seas swallowed coastlines and entire cultures disappeared beneath the floodwaters, echoes of which survive in myths from Sumer to India to the Americas. Nearly every culture holding within its lore a story of a great deluge, of a land drowned, of gods punishing men or nature reclaiming what was built. Myths that may all point back to a real event, the melting of glaciers around 12,000 years ago, an event that raised sea levels hundreds of feet and could have erased coastal cities, leaving only whispers and memories that became myth, passed down orally until Plato gave it philosophical form. Could it be, then, that Atlantis was not one place, but a symbol of many lost places, fragments of forgotten civilizations erased by time, their wisdom encoded in myths, their ruins hidden beneath waves, waiting for rediscovery? Yet still, the detail in Plato's description, its harbors, its temples, its fertile plain, its concentric design, tempts us to believe in specificity, that Atlantis was real, built by hands that understood geometry, astronomy, perhaps even sciences we have not yet reclaimed. And this belief fuels endless speculation that Atlantis was not merely advanced but impossibly so, a civilization with technologies lost to us, energy harnessed from crystals, flight, levitation, weapons of power described by mystics like Edgar Cayce, who claimed visions of Atlantean machines, prophecies that the ruins would rise again near Bimini in the Bahamas, where strange stone structures have indeed been found beneath the sea. Skeptics dismiss such claims as fantasy, pseudoscience, the human tendency to project dreams onto the unknown. Yet the mystery persists because the idea of Atlantis resonates with something deep within us, a recognition of cycles of rise and fall, of greatness followed by collapse, a recognition that civilizations are fragile, that hubris leads to downfall, that beneath our progress lies the specter of ruin, and Atlantis serves as a mirror of our fears as much as a mystery of our past. But still, there is the question of why Plato told the tale, for he used it to contrast the virtuous, modest Athens with the decadent imperial Atlantis. And perhaps his intent was purely philosophical, a story invented to illustrate moral truths. And yet he insists it was true history. And so we are left in the space between, unable to dismiss, unable to confirm, caught in the spell of the possibility that hidden beneath some ocean floor lies the shattered columns of a once great city, the remains of temples where priests watched the stars, where kings ruled over fleets that crossed the world, where knowledge beyond our own was nurtured and then extinguished, waiting for us to rediscover. And so divers descend into the depths, scanning with sonar, mapping with satellites. Archaeologists pore over ancient maps like the Piri Reis chart that seems to depict coastlines long buried under ice. Adventurers chase whispers of ruins in Cuba's underwater plains, in the Caribbean, in the Gulf of Cadiz, in the shadows of the Canary Islands. And every anomaly, every out-of-place artifact becomes fuel for the dream of Atlantis, the city that will not die, the enigma that keeps pulling us forward generation after generation. Because Atlantis is not only about the past, but also about ourselves. It asks whether human history is linear or cyclical, whether we are the first to achieve our heights or whether others came before, rising, shining, and falling into oblivion, leaving us to begin again. Perhaps that is why Atlantis haunts us, because it embodies the fragility of civilization, the reminder that what we build may be lost in a single night of disaster, and that our pride, our sense of permanence, is but an illusion, as fragile as the memory of a drowned city, as fleeting as a myth told around a fire. Yet even as science demands proof, the legend continues to exert its grip. Artists paint it, writers imagine it, filmmakers bring it to life, spiritual seekers meditate upon it. Because Atlantis is not just a city, it is an archetype. The archetype of the golden age lost, the paradise fallen, the wisdom forgotten, the story that lives in the collective unconscious. A story that demands we keep searching, not only for ruins in the sea, but for meaning in our own time. For Atlantis is not only the city that may have been, but the city that might yet be again. A warning and a promise, a myth and perhaps a memory, a mystery that has already changed history by inspiring centuries of exploration, debate, and wonder. A riddle that, even if never solved, will continue to shape the way we dream of our origins, our destinies, and the fragile line between greatness and ruin. And so the waves roll on, concealing whatever truth lies beneath. But the name Atlantis echoes still, eternal, mysterious, half hidden in Plato's words, half glimpsed in the depths of our imagination. A phantom city that refuses to sink completely, reminding us that history may be far stranger, far deeper than we dare to believe. That beneath the oceans of our world and the oceans of our memory, there may yet lie answers waiting, or perhaps only more questions. And perhaps that is the true power of Atlantis, not in whether it existed, but in how it compels us to look deeper, to search, to wonder, to remember that mystery itself is the lifeblood of history, and that somewhere, in the silence of the deep, the lost city still waits.
The Nazca Lines, messages to the gods or extraterrestrials? Across the arid expanse of the Peruvian desert, stretching across a barren plateau scorched by sun and time, lies one of the world's most perplexing enigmas, hundreds of enormous geoglyphs carved into the earth. Lines and shapes so vast that their true forms can only be grasped from the sky, as if designed for eyes not bound to the ground but soaring above. A silent canvas etched into the desert floor by the Nazca culture between 500 BC and 500 AD, though some argue for even older origins. A colossal gallery of animals, plants, geometric figures, and endless straight lines slicing across the land with uncanny precision. And yet the question remains, why? What purpose did these creations serve? What message were they meant to convey, and to whom were they directed? For the hummingbird, the monkey, the spider, the condor, the orca, the mysterious humanoid figure with wide eyes staring outward, all stretch across miles of sand where no viewer on the ground could ever perceive their full majesty. A paradox that suggests either ritual meant for the gods above, astronomical alignments for celestial calculations, or something stranger still. Messages meant for beings who might have viewed them not from hills or towers, but from the skies themselves. The mystery is compounded by the sheer scale and execution, for the desert surface is darkened by a layer of oxidized pebbles, and by removing these stones, the Nazca expose the lighter sand beneath, creating lines that have endured for centuries thanks to the desert's arid stillness. But enduring does not explain creating.
And though archaeologists suggest they were made with simple tools and ropes to maintain straightness, the question of motive resists simple answers. For what culture invests such colossal effort into designs invisible to their own eyes? What compels people to etch straight lines that run for miles across uneven terrain? What drives the shaping of spirals, trapezoids, and animal figures on a scale only birds or gods could appreciate? Some scholars argue the lines were ritual pathways, sacred routes walked during ceremonies to call forth water in one of the driest regions on Earth, a desert where rainfall is almost non-existent, suggesting the geoglyphs were acts of devotion, prayers carved into the land for deities to answer with fertility and rain, while others see them as astronomical calendars, alignments with solstices and star risings that allowed the Nazca to track time, planting, and harvest in a harsh climate, the lines functioning as both ritual and science, sacred geometry etched into earth as a mirror of heaven. Yet these explanations, though plausible, do not dispel the strangeness. For why animals of such scale? Why images that can only be seen fully from above, unless the very point was to be seen from above? And here alternative theories unfurl. Theories of extraterrestrial contact, of ancient astronauts who might have guided the Nazca or received their offerings. For to those who favor this view, the lines resemble landing strips, the broad runway stretching across the desert like airfields for visitors from the stars. The animals and figures functioning as signals or beacons to identify the earthbound correspondents, a hypothesis made famous by Erich von Däniken in Chariots of the Gods, where the Nazca lines become evidence of a forgotten contact between human and otherworldly intelligence. And though mainstream archaeology dismisses such notions as fantasy, the allure persists. For the lines do look like pathways from the sky, and the desert canvas does feel like a message written not for humans, but for eyes that watched from above. Skeptics counter that the Nazca could have visualized the figures using scaled grids, that viewing towers or nearby hills allowed partial perspectives, that the figures were meant for the gods of the sky rather than literal skyborne visitors. Yet still the enigma endures, because the sheer variety, over 800 straight lines, 300 geometric figures, and 70 animal and plant designs, cannot be fully explained by practicality alone. They resonate with mystery, with intent that feels larger than the immediate needs of survival, as though the Nazca sought not only water and fertility, but communion, as though they were reaching outward, upward, beyond themselves. And indeed, the desert itself conspires with the mystery, for standing amid the lines, one sees nothing but stretches of ground, meaningless without perspective. But when taken from above, they form a silent symphony, a coded message visible only from heights humans of that era could never attain. Unless balloons, towers, or imagination provided the lift, unless the purpose was precisely that, to be incomprehensible on the ground, comprehensible only from the divine view, making the desert itself an altar to the sky. But who was meant to see, and what was meant to be understood, remains unknown. And in that unknowing, the Nazca lines become a mirror of humanity's hunger for meaning, a stage upon which we project gods, aliens, rituals, science, each theory reflecting our own obsessions as much as the truth of the ancient builders. And perhaps that is why the lines haunt us, because they resist being reduced to a single explanation. They remain a riddle not of practicality, but of worldview, a testament to a people whose cosmology was written not in books or temples, but in the earth itself,
whose prayers and stories are visible only from a God's eye view. And yet there are further puzzles, for the figures are not randomly placed, but often connected to underground water sources, suggesting a mapping of invisible life beneath the desert, a sacred cartography of survival and myth. While the animals chosen, the hummingbird, the spider, the monkey, carry symbolic weight, fertility, rain, weaving of life, messages layered within images, each shape both ritual and metaphor.
And when the desert wind howls over these figures, one can imagine the Nazca priests walking the lines, chanting, offering, turning the ground itself into a theater of devotion, their movements completing the glyphs as if activating them in ceremony, gestures not meant for mortal eyes, but for something beyond. Still, the alien hypothesis refuses to die, because in the stark imagery of the astronaut glyph, with its wide eyes and raised hand, believers see more than human. They see the echo of a contact remembered in stone, a figure pointing upward as though to remind us of origins in the sky. And though mainstream science may argue for symbolic human forms, the mystery clings. For who can say definitively what the Nazca believed? Who can step into the vanished minds of a vanished culture and reclaim certainty from silence? The desert holds its secrets, and though satellites map, though drones fly overhead capturing the totality of the glyphs, the purpose remains elusive. Perhaps deliberately so, perhaps meant always to remain mystery. For what greater offering to gods or beings of the beyond than a riddle carved into earth, lasting for millennia, visible only to those who rise above? The Nazca lines endure because they unsettle, because they blur the boundary between devotion and communication, between science and myth, between earth and sky. And in their silence, they remind us that not all mysteries are meant to be solved. Some are meant to haunt, to inspire, to keep us looking upward and outward, wondering who we are speaking to when we carve our symbols into the world. Perhaps, after all, the lines were not messages to gods or aliens, but to the future, to us, a civilization that would one day fly above the earth and finally see them. A reminder across time that we are not the first to reach for the sky, that others before us wrote their prayers into the land, waiting for us to look down and wonder, to feel the echo of their mystery under the blazing sun of the Peruvian desert, to stand at the threshold of meaning and know that some questions stretch wider than any answer, as vast and eternal as the lines themselves.
The Voynich Manuscript, the book that can't be read. In the hushed chambers of rare libraries, where centuries-old dust clings to leather-bound tomes, lies a volume that has defied every codebreaker, scholar, and dreamer who has dared to open its vellum pages. The Voynich Manuscript, a book that cannot be read. A riddle wrapped in parchment, whose curling script and fantastical illustrations whisper of knowledge forever sealed from understanding. Its origin shrouded in shadow, its language unlike any known tongue, its alphabet unlike any known script, a creation at once human and alien, scholarly and nonsensical, sacred and absurd. And the longer one studies it, the deeper the mystery grows. For the manuscript appears to have been written in the early 15th century, based on radiocarbon dating of its calfskin pages. Yet its content defies any conventional framework. Botanical drawings of plants that do not exist, astronomical charts that map stars and zodiac signs in strange distortions, pages of naked women immersed in green pools and interconnected by strange plumbing-like tubes, alchemical diagrams that suggest knowledge of transformation, herbal recipes written in lines of script flowing like water but utterly impenetrable. A text that is too structured to be gibberish, yet too elusive to be language as we know it. Its very name comes from Wilfrid Voynich, a Polish book dealer who purchased the manuscript in 1912 from the Jesuit Collegio Romano. Yet its history stretches further back, possibly owned by Emperor Rudolph II of the Holy Roman Empire, who reputedly believed it to be the work of Roger Bacon, the English medieval philosopher accused of dabbling in forbidden sciences, though no evidence confirms this. And each clue only spirals into more uncertainty, as is the manuscript as a hall of mirrors where every answer reflects another question. Cryptographers from World War II who cracked Nazi ciphers tried their hand at the text and failed. Modern computer algorithms struggle and offer no translation. Linguists oscillate between believing it is an unknown constructed language, a sophisticated cipher, or a hoax of remarkable artistry.
Yet the possibility of hoax feels thin, for why would a medieval trickster pour years of work into an undecipherable script, invent hundreds of unique glyphs, fill hundreds of pages with coherent patterns of letters that obey linguistic laws of word frequency and structure, then accompany it all with drawings that mirror science yet evade reason? A hoax whose complexity transcends the prank, as though whoever made it either possessed knowledge we cannot fathom or sought to encode ideas meant only for the initiated, knowledge hidden behind a veil that centuries of scholarship cannot pierce. Indeed, some see in its drawings echoes of alchemical manuals, guides to transmutation of matter and soul. Others see medical treatises,
Herbal remedies woven with astrological timing, a medieval grimoire that linked stars, plants, and the human body, while others insist the language is glossolalia, the outpouring of a mind consumed with private invention, the creation of a script and world for no one but itself, a diary of madness or genius. But in every case, the manuscript eludes capture, resisting every net we cast. A sphinx smiling from its parchment throne, its riddles intact. The botanical section, with plants that resemble none known today, suggests either lost species or imaginative hybrids. Leaves twisted into shapes that defy classification, roots resembling organs, flowers bursting with impossible geometry, as if nature itself were reinvented, while the astronomical section shows stars, suns, moons, and the zodiac signs, but often distorted, as if observed from another vantage, as if the night sky itself were different for the scribe, as if we are glimpsing not Earth's heavens but another realm entirely. The so-called balneological section, with its naked women soaking in green liquid pools connected by tubular systems, has been interpreted as depictions of baths, fertility rites, alchemical vessels, even microscopic biology. Yet all speculation only deepens the riddle, for the medieval world should not have conceived such imagery, and yet there it is, inscribed with casual confidence, as if recording knowledge common in its time, yet utterly alien to ours. The text itself flows in curving lines, words formed from an alphabet of 20-25 characters, written left to right, following consistent grammar-like rules, with repeated words and phrases, statistical patterns similar to natural languages. But no known cipher matches, no Rosetta Stone has been found, and attempts at decipherment yield gibberish or vague phrases. Each new theory collapsing under scrutiny, as if the book mocks our efforts, revealing only fragments before vanishing again.
And so the manuscript becomes more than text. It becomes myth, inspiring theories that range from the plausible to the fantastical. Perhaps it encodes the wisdom of an esoteric order, preserved in cipher against persecution. Perhaps it is a manual from a lost civilization, a survival of Atlantean or Cathar knowledge. Perhaps it is a memory of alien contact, a record of beings who walked among us and shared their sciences. The script a reflection of a language not of Earth. Or perhaps it is not meant to be read at all. Perhaps its purpose is to provoke wonder, to embody mystery, to be a puzzle without solution, the very act of our seeking its meaning, the ritual it demands. And in this sense, the Voynich manuscript becomes a mirror of ourselves, reflecting our yearning to decode the undecodable, to impose order on chaos, to believe that meaning lies hidden in the noise, waiting only for the right key, when perhaps the key does not exist, or exists only for those long dead, or for those not human. Yet still, the manuscript sits in Yale University's Voynich Rare Book Library, folio after folio preserved in silence, its parchment whispering secrets that refuse to become words, its ink a locked door. And scholars keep trying, keep analyzing letter frequency, keep feeding scans into AI, keep cross-referencing medieval herbals, keep turning pages hoping for a breakthrough. Because the possibility of meaning compels us, because the idea that knowledge lies before us and remains inaccessible is intolerable. We crave revelation, and the Voynich denies us, thus ensuring it remains immortal, a riddle that will outlast its solvers, a reminder that some knowledge, perhaps, is not meant for us, or not meant for now, perhaps destined for another age or another species to understand. And in that refusal, the manuscript acquires power, a power that binds the imagination of cryptographers, historians, occultists, conspiracy theorists, and poets alike, all drawn into its orbit, all convinced that if they stare long enough, if they think differently enough, the veil will lift and the book will speak. Yet it never does. It remains mute, a sphinx in parchment. And in that silence, we hear not emptiness but possibility, the echo of secrets that will never fade.
The Antikythera mechanism, ancient computer of the gods. From the silent seabed off the coast of Antikythera, where a Roman-era shipwreck slumbered for 2 millennia beneath salt and shadow, there emerged in 1901 a corroded lump of bronze and wood that would shatter our understanding of the ancient world. A fragment that, when painstakingly cleaned, revealed itself to be a machine so intricate, so impossibly advanced, that it should not, by all rights, have existed in its time. The Antikythera mechanism, often called the world's first computer, a clockwork device of gears, dials, and inscriptions that could predict eclipses, chart lunar cycles, and model the motions of planets. A mechanical cosmos in miniature crafted around 100 BCE, centuries before the precision of such engineering was thought possible. Its very existence a paradox that gnaws at the fabric of history, forcing us to ask whether we have underestimated the genius of ancient Greece or whether some knowledge, some whisper of the gods, or of civilizations lost, guided its creation. For when X-rays pierced the corroded fragments, they revealed a labyrinth of at least 30 bronze gears, interlocked with teeth finer than those in medieval cathedral clocks. A sophistication unmatched until the 14th century, a gap of more than 1,000 years. As if time itself had slipped, as if an age of enlightenment flared in secret and was extinguished, leaving behind only this relic as proof of what humanity once dared to imagine. And yet, though we understand its gears, we do not understand its story. For who built it, and why? And how did such knowledge vanish into the dark? Some attribute it to the genius of Archimedes, the Syracusan mathematician said to have designed war machines and intricate devices, perhaps crafting this one before his death, though no direct link survives. Others imagine workshops of Rhodes, where astronomers and engineers gathered. Yet the silence of history suggests that if such machines existed, they were rare, perhaps one of a kind. And if they existed, why were they not copied? Why did their design not spread? Unless knowledge itself was guarded, restricted, hidden, or destroyed.
The device, once reconstructed, revealed its purpose: to model the heavens, to follow the cycles of the sun and moon, to forecast eclipses with astonishing precision, to predict the timing of Pan-Hellenic games like the Olympics, an interweaving of science, religion, and culture. Its face adorned with inscriptions that act as a guidebook, though many remain fragmented, teasing us with half-sentences and faded numbers, suggesting lost instructions, lost meanings. Some see in it not merely a calendar, but a ritual instrument, a sacred object by which priests could align ceremonies with celestial rhythms. An oracle of gears that brought the divine order of the cosmos into human hands. And the thought lingers, was this truly the work of human artisans, or was it a gift, knowledge whispered by gods, by muses, by visitors from the stars? For to hold in one's hand a device that contains the universe is to hold power that feels otherworldly. And perhaps the very reason it vanished was because it was too dangerous, too sacred, too potent to survive in an age of shifting empires. Even today, as scientists labor with 3D models and digital reconstructions, questions remain. Did the Antikythera mechanism represent a lone miracle of invention, or was it the survivor of a tradition of technology now erased? Traces of which lie hidden in ruins, in burned libraries, in forgotten scrolls. Some imagine that the Library of Alexandria once housed treatises on such machines, blueprints lost to flames and conquest. That the ancients reached a level of scientific mastery far beyond what we attribute to them.
glimpses of which flare in myths of Daedalus' automatons, of Hephaestus' mechanical servants, stories dismissed as myth, yet echoing the reality of gears and mechanisms, perhaps memories of machines like Antikythera, woven into legend as gifts of the gods. The possibility chills and seduces, for if the ancients had such knowledge, where did it go? And if they did not, then how did one craftsman, in an age of bronze and chisel, create a mechanical cosmos that rivals Renaissance genius? Unless knowledge flows in cycles, rising, falling, forgotten, rediscovered. Or, unless more disturbingly, knowledge is sometimes given, placed in human hands by those who watch from above, guiding us, testing us, seeding our progress with sparks of the extraordinary. Skeptics scoff, insisting the Antikythera mechanism was but a marvel of Greek genius, an outlier that survived by chance. Yet even in that explanation, awe remains. For to imagine ancient artisans filing bronze teeth so minuscule, arranging gears in nested precision, inscribing celestial cycles in a machine no larger than a shoebox, is to imagine minds as sharp as ours, unbound by the supposed limits of their age, reaching forward across centuries into a future they could never know. And so the mechanism endures as both artifact and enigma, displayed behind glass, yet radiating a power that no case can contain. Its silent gears frozen in corrosion, yet still turning in the imagination, whispering of what was, of what could have been, of what might still be hidden in the depths of history. Waiting to be found, waiting to remind us that human knowledge is not a straight line, but a labyrinth, and somewhere, in its winding paths, machines of the gods tick in silence, waiting to awaken.
The Moai of Easter Island, walking statues of stone. Far across the vast emptiness of the Pacific Ocean, more than 2,000 miles from the nearest continental shore, there rises a lonely island carved by volcanic fire and wrapped in winds of silence. A place the world knows as Easter Island, but which its people call Rapa Nui, a name whispered through centuries of isolation, and scattered across its grassy slopes and volcanic ridges stand the Moai. Nearly 900 colossal statues of stone, their faces long and solemn, their eyes once inlaid with coral, their torsos emerging from the earth as if they are both born of the land and guardians of it, each weighing many tons, some towering over 30 feet high. A people's silent army carved from volcanic tuff, hauled across impossible distances, and erected with an intention still cloaked in mystery. For why would a small, remote community, limited in resources and hemmed in by the sea, dedicate such monumental effort to quarrying, shaping, transporting, and raising these immense figures? And how did they achieve such feats without the benefit of beasts of burden, metal tools, or wheels, in an age and place where survival itself was already precarious? Unless the statues were more than stone, unless they were vessels of mana, spiritual energy, channels to ancestors and gods, the very lifeblood of the people bound into volcanic flesh, so sacred that no sacrifice of labor was too great. Yet even knowing this, the questions multiply. For the Moai are not scattered randomly, but positioned to face inland, gazing over the villages as if watching, protecting, guarding, their backs to the sea as though turning away from the outside world, focused entirely on their own, as if the island itself were the universe and the Moai the watchers of it. A paradox of vision and meaning, their blank eyes staring across grass and stone, but into mysteries we cannot penetrate. And legends whisper that they did not simply stand where men dragged them, but that they walked. That the Moai themselves, through the chanting of priests and the force of mana, shuffled upright across the land to their platforms, moving like giants animated by spiritual power. And strangely enough, modern experiments have shown that with ropes and coordinated pulling, these statues can indeed be walked upright in a swaying motion, as though the legend holds a kernel of truth, the line between myth and engineering blurring in the salt winds of the Pacific.
But the deeper riddle is not merely how the Moai moved, but why they stopped. For many statues lie unfinished in quarries, some abandoned mid-carving, as if a sudden catastrophe ended the work, as if time itself halted. And theories abound: deforestation, overuse of resources, social collapse, civil war, the arrival of Europeans bringing disease and enslavement, each a possible piece of the puzzle, yet none erasing the strangeness of a culture that poured its soul into stone and then fell silent, its great works left incomplete, its people scattered, its meaning lost, leaving only the statues to bear witness. Some see in the Moai echoes of older mysteries, the universal human impulse to raise stone giants, the pyramids of Giza, the menhirs of Karnak, the statues of Tiahuanaco. Each culture distant in time and place, yet reaching for the same act, to embody permanence, to fix memory into matter, to commune with gods through stone. And the Moai become part of this chorus, yet also unique, for no other place holds such an island of giants facing inward, an entire society seemingly built around the worship of ancestral presence, as though the dead themselves stood among the living, as though the boundary between spirit and matter dissolved upon these volcanic slopes. Others whisper darker theories, that the Moai were not mere ancestral effigies, but beacons, markers visible from the sky, messages to those who once visited. For from above they form patterns, alignments, a code inscribed across the island, and some point to Rapa Nui's isolation, so far from other lands, as suggesting an origin not entirely of Earth. The Moai perhaps echoes of a memory of gods who descended from the heavens, their likenesses carved in enduring stone, their presence eternalized as a promise of return. And though mainstream archaeology scoffs at such interpretations, the strangeness of the Moai invites them, for they are at once too human and too alien, their blank gazes evoking both comfort and unease, their silence louder than words. And then there are the Ahu, the stone platforms upon which the Moai stand, constructed with massive blocks fitted with precision, reminiscent of Inca masonry, though the cultures never touched. Another whisper of some shared or lost knowledge of working with stone. And beneath some platforms lie tombs, suggesting the statues were indeed tied to ancestor worship. Yet the scale and dedication exceed mere funerary practice, hinting at a cosmology in which the entire island was alive with spiritual currents. The Moai anchoring these flows, each one a node in a network of sacred geography, a machine of belief carved into the land. And when one stands before them today, with the wind biting and the ocean endless on the horizon, one cannot help but feel watched, judged, remembered by these stone guardians, as if they know more than we ever will about why they exist. And perhaps the greatest mystery is not technical nor spiritual, but existential. For the Moai remind us that civilizations, no matter how isolated, no matter how fragile, strive for meaning beyond survival. That human beings carve permanence out of impermanence, even if it costs them everything. And in Rapa Nui's collapse, we see both a warning and a riddle. Did the people destroy themselves through devotion to their statues, cutting forests to move them until the land could no longer sustain life? Or was this narrative of ecocide a projection by outsiders? While the truth of their decline was invasion, disease, enslavement, the violence of contact with the wider world. Their culture shattered before it could explain itself, their voices silenced, leaving the statues to speak in riddles no one can answer. And so the Moai endure, guardians of a vanished story, giants who walked, who watched, who still watch. Their stone faces turned inward, as if keeping secrets from the rest of the world. Secrets of gods or ancestors or stars. Secrets perhaps not meant for us to know. And in their silence, they are alive, their mystery growing deeper with every century of unanswered questions. Their presence a testament to the unfathomable depths of human imagination, or perhaps to something beyond the human. Something that walked among the islanders once, and may yet walk again.
The Dead Sea Scrolls, secrets hidden for millennia. In the arid caves that puncture the cliffs near Qumran, overlooking the silent waters of the Dead Sea, a shepherd boy in 1947 tossed a stone into darkness and heard the shattering of clay jars, a sound that would reverberate through history. For within those jars lay the fragments of a forgotten world. Scrolls of parchment and papyrus wrapped in decay, yet still whispering across 2,000 years. Texts now called the Dead Sea Scrolls, writings that have altered our understanding of ancient Judaism, early Christianity, and the very roots of Western faith, but which remain, even after decades of study, cloaked in controversy, secrecy, and unanswered questions, as though they were not simply texts, but keys to mystery still forbidden. For the scrolls, numbering in the hundreds, contain a bewildering mixture. Copies of Hebrew Bible books older than any previously known, sectarial rules of a community obsessed with purity and the end of days, hymns and prayers to a God who both punishes and redeems, cryptic apocalyptic visions, and texts so strange they defy easy classification. Works that mention figures like the teacher of righteousness and the wicked priest, characters half historical, half mythic, who seem to hint at suppressed chapters of religious history, shadows of rival messiahs and sects competing in the wilderness, voices silenced in the canon that later triumphed. And the questions rise like desert winds. Who wrote these scrolls? Why were they hidden, and why, after their discovery, were they kept from the world for decades by a small circle of scholars, fueling suspicion that what they contained might unravel accepted truths, that within their brittle fibers lay revelations too dangerous to release? The dominant theory places their origin with the Essenes, a sect that withdrew from Jerusalem to live in purity near Qumran, awaiting the apocalypse and the coming of God's kingdom. Their lives austere, their devotion fierce, their pens pouring out scripture, commentary, and prophecy. But not all agree. Some see them as the library of Jerusalem itself, hidden from the Romans during the Jewish War. Others as the remnants of multiple groups, their texts mingling in caves like voices carried by the desert wind. And in this uncertainty, the scrolls resist ownership. They belong not to one sect, but to the entire spectrum of early Jewish thought, a shattered mirror reflecting forgotten beliefs, alternative visions of God, law, and salvation, and perhaps even of a Messiah not remembered in orthodoxy. Yet most provocative is the overlap with early Christianity, for within the scrolls are ideas of light versus darkness, of communal meals and ritual washings, of a messianic figure bringing salvation, echoes so strong that some suggest John the Baptist or even Jesus himself may have been influenced by this sect, or that the teacher of righteousness was a Christ-like figure whose memory was erased by the later church. And though scholars debate these parallels endlessly, the aura of suppressed truth clings to the scrolls, as if they contain a gospel not written, a story of faith that diverged from the one the world came to know. And then there is the secrecy, the decades in which only a select few scholars were allowed access, pages locked in vaults, photographs withheld, translations delayed, until whispers of conspiracy grew louder than official silence, fueling claims that the Vatican itself sought to suppress portions that might undermine Christian doctrine. And though many of these claims remain speculative, the fact that it took nearly half a century for the scrolls to be fully published keeps suspicion alive, as if the texts themselves carry a dangerous power, a power institutions feared to unleash. But what if the danger lies not in contradiction, but in possibility, in the way the scrolls remind us that religion was never monolithic, that in the centuries before and after Christ, countless voices argued, dreamed, and prophesied, and what we call truth today is but one thread that survived while others were cut, the scrolls giving voice to those silenced threads, showing us that history is not destiny, but choice, that belief is not singular, but contested, messy, human. Yet the mystery deepens still, for within the caves remain unread fragments, words yet to be pieced together,
phrases without context, puzzles awaiting keys we may never find, and technology now scans them with infrared, revealing hidden writing invisible to the eye, as though the scrolls still breathe secrets, unveiling them only slowly, teasing us with knowledge half-glimpsed. Some even whisper that hidden among the texts may be references to lost books of the Bible, scriptures erased from memory, or even mystical instructions of angelic beings. For certain scrolls speak of heavenly visions, cosmic battles, angelic hosts warring against the forces of darkness. Texts that feel less like human invention and more like revelations from beyond, reminding us that the line between prophecy and vision, scripture and hallucination is razor thin. And what of the copper scroll, unique among the horde, etched not on parchment but on metal, listing supposed treasures buried in secret places, gold, silver, sacred vessels? Its tone practical, like an inventory, yet the treasures have never been found, leading some to believe it encodes symbolic truths, others that it is a map to hidden riches still buried beneath the desert. A testament that mystery lingers not only in words, but in promises of what lies beneath stone and sand. But perhaps the greatest mystery is not what the scrolls say, but why they survived. Why, in a desert that erases everything, these fragile texts endured for millennia, waiting for a boy's careless stone to uncover them, as if destiny preserved them for our age, as if they were meant to emerge when the modern world, skeptical yet searching, could be both threatened and inspired by them. As if they are a message across time, reminding us that truth is never final, that revelation is never complete, that mystery always endures. And so the Dead Sea Scrolls remain what they have always been, fragments of faith, whispers of a forgotten chorus, riddles written in ink and silence, their meaning debated, their secrets only half revealed, their power undiminished. And when one stands in the caves of Qumran, staring at the hollows where jars once rested, one feels the presence of those who hid them, hurried, fearful, yet determined, believing that their words, though they themselves might perish, would endure. That someday others would find them, that across the ages the voice of the teacher of righteousness, of prophets unnamed, of dreamers unremembered, would rise again from parchment to trouble and inspire, to remind us that the past is never dead. It waits in silence, in scrolls, in jars, in caves, waiting for us to listen.
The Indus Valley Script, the language that won't speak. In the dust-choked plains of modern-day Pakistan and northwest India, buried beneath centuries of silence, archaeologists uncovered the sprawling ruins of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, cities older than the pyramids, older than Stonehenge, planned with uncanny precision, with streets laid in grids, drainage systems that rival modern engineering, wells and granaries that speak of abundance, and homes whose bricks still bear the fingerprints of their makers. Yet amid this architectural genius lies an enigma that refuses to yield. The Indus Valley Script, a language inscribed on tiny seals, carved into pottery, etched on tools, and scratched into stone. Symbols compact and haunting, appearing in sequences as though forming words, yet no Rosetta Stone has ever been found to unlock their meaning, leaving one of the world's greatest civilizations voiceless, its thoughts sealed away in pictographs that remain mute. Over 4,000 inscribed objects have been discovered, and the symbols, about 400 distinct signs, are tantalizingly structured. Too systematic to be mere decoration, too patterned to be random, yet too short and fragmentary to give linguists the length they crave for decipherment. Most inscriptions containing only 5 to 10 characters, as if the ancients wished to taunt posterity with whispers but never shouts, a puzzle composed of fragments without a key. And so the debate rages. Was this truly a script, encoding a spoken language now lost, or was it some proto-writing, symbolic shorthand for trade, rituals, or ownership, a semiotic system that never sought to capture full human speech? Scholars split, some insisting the signs hide an early form of Dravidian, ancestor to Tamil and its kin, others arguing for a long-extinct branch of Indo-Aryan.
while skeptics claim it is not language at all, but mere religious or administrative symbols. And each theory finds defenders armed with statistical models, linguistic parallels, and computer analyses. Yet none can break the wall of silence the script erects. For without a bilingual inscription, a Rosetta Stone equivalent, the characters resist translation, their meaning sliding through the fingers of even the most brilliant minds, mocking human pride with ancient silence. The seals themselves, often small enough to fit in the palm, carved with animals, unicorns, bulls, elephants, tigers alongside the script, deepen the mystery. For why should a civilization so advanced in urban design, so sophisticated in craft, leave behind no decipherable literature, no chronicles of kings, no hymns, no laws, only these terse fragments that feel more like passwords than prose? As if the civilization spoke only in codes meant never to be cracked, or as if, when their world collapsed around 1900 BCE, they deliberately buried their words in secrecy, ensuring that no outsider would ever pry into their sacred knowledge. Theories abound, some suggesting the seals were magical amulets, words of power used in ritual, their brevity reflecting incantations, names of gods, or mystical formulas. Others that they were trademarks, labels of merchants whose goods flowed along the arteries of the Indus economy, linking Mesopotamia, Persia, and beyond. And indeed, Indus seals have been found in Sumer, proof of far-flung trade. But even then, why a script that no one else could read? Unless, perhaps, it was meant precisely as an esoteric code, intelligible only to the initiated, a language not of the people but of the priesthood, guarding secrets of commerce and cosmos alike. And then there are the eerie speculations, whispered in the margins of academia, that the script may not be human in origin at all, but inherited, perhaps, from a forgotten predecessor civilization, an older culture erased from history, yet leaving behind its symbolic traces, or even, in the fringes of imagination, a language gifted or cursed by beings beyond Earth, an alien script that humans of the Indus merely borrowed but never fully understood, repeating signs as talismans rather than words. And though such theories find little place in scholarly journals, they cling to the mystery like shadows to twilight, for in the absence of certainty, imagination thrives. But perhaps the true strangeness lies not in what the script says, but in what its silence reveals about human arrogance. For here we stand, armed with supercomputers and AI, with satellites mapping the ruins, with infrared scanning of buried sites, and still these tiny etchings laugh at us, reminding us that knowledge is fragile, that writing, the bedrock of civilization, can vanish utterly, leaving behind nothing but mute symbols and untranslatable dreams. And in that vanishing lies another enigma. How could such a mighty civilization, whose cities dwarfed those of its contemporaries, whose people numbered in the millions, vanish so completely that even their tongue dissolved into oblivion? No songs, no legends, no genealogies carried into later traditions. As if they were swallowed whole by the desert, leaving us not only without words but without memory. A civilization erased so thoroughly that its script is now the only ghost left, a ghost that refuses to speak. Some archaeologists suggest climate change, rivers drying, monsoons failing, forced their dispersal, scattering them into India's south, where perhaps their descendants survive in Dravidian tongues, carrying unremembered fragments of Indus speech, while others see violent conquest by Indo-Aryan migrants, their language and gods stamping out the Indus voice, burying it beneath new mythologies. And in this contest of theories, the mute script remains the only impartial witness, silent, unyielding, unwilling to tell us whether its people prayed to Shiva in embryo or to gods no longer known, whether they sang hymns of cosmic order or whispered only in pragmatic trade notes, whether their hearts burned with prophecy or with grain accounts, all forever locked within symbols whose meanings fled with the last scribe. And yet, every time a new seal is dug from the earth, every time a new fragment surfaces, the world holds its breath, hoping for the one inscription long enough, rich enough, double written perhaps with a foreign tongue, that might break the code, the way Champollion cracked hieroglyphs with Greek. But the Indus gives no such gift, only more shards, more brevity, more fragments, as if it delights in prolonging its enigma, stretching human curiosity across centuries, whispering always but never answering. And so the Indus Valley script endures as the greatest unbroken code of antiquity, a riddle carved in stone and silence, a reminder that civilizations can rise in brilliance yet vanish into obscurity, leaving us to stumble in the ruins with questions but no answers, to hold in our hands the seals of a people whose thoughts are locked forever beyond reach, unless somewhere, buried deep in an unexcavated mound, there lies a scroll, a tablet, an inscription with the key, still waiting, still hidden, a final message from the Indus scribes, one that could awaken their voice after 4,000 years of slumber, one that could finally make the language speak. And until then, we remain like supplicants before a sealed door, reading the carvings on its surface, knowing they mean something, yet barred forever from entering, left only with silence, wonder, and the haunting presence of a language that refuses to be heard.
Göbekli Tepe, the world's first temple? High upon a limestone ridge in southeastern Turkey, where the horizon rolls into barren hills and the stars at night burn with unpolluted brilliance, lies a site so ancient, so improbable, that it has forced archaeologists to rewrite the timeline of human civilization. Göbekli Tepe, a sanctuary of megalithic pillars erected 6,000 years before Stonehenge, 7,000 before the Great Pyramid, and long before pottery, writing, or metal, a place that should not exist according to our old stories of progress. For in 9600 BCE, humanity was supposed to be a scattered web of hunter-gatherer tribes, scraping survival from wild herds and seasonal harvests. Yet here, on this wind-swept hill, they carved and hauled monolithic stones weighing up to 20 tons, arranged them in great circles, and decorated them with reliefs of animals, lions, snakes, vultures, boars, foxes, symbols so vivid that they seem almost alive, guardians of mysteries written not in words but in stone. And the question reverberates like an echo through millennia: who built Göbekli Tepe, and why? The conventional answer offers cautious awe. Early Neolithic hunter-gatherers gathered here, perhaps seasonally, uniting clans in ritual, worshiping gods we no longer know, pouring their collective strength into a monument to belief itself, a structure that reveals religion preceded agriculture, that before we sowed the earth, we sowed ideas of the divine, and that perhaps it was not the domestication of wheat that birthed temples, but the yearning for temples that birthed agriculture. For archaeologists discovered, scattered around Göbekli Tepe, the wild progenitors of grain, as though humanity gathered here to feast, to commune, to dream of gods, and only afterward chose to settle, to plant, to build civilizations to sustain ritual, flipping the story of our origins upside down. Yet even within this theory lurks unease, for the stones are too precise, too ambitious for nomadic foragers, the carvings too sophisticated, the engineering too deliberate, raising whispers of knowledge lost, of an intelligence we have underestimated, or worse, one we have forgotten, a people who understood more than they should have in that distant dawn of time. Each pillar, towering in T-shapes, is not mere stone but anthropomorphic form. Shoulders, arms, hands clasped to the abdomen, faceless yet undeniably human, or perhaps superhuman.
Colossal guardians embodying something beyond flesh, their silence pressing upon visitors with an aura both sacred and unnerving, as though they are not just statues but presences, watching across 12 millennia, reminding us that time erodes but reverence endures. And in the carvings of animals, some see not mere decoration but cosmology, a bestiary of spirits, a zodiac of beasts. Each circle of pillars a map of heaven and earth. The vultures perhaps symbols of death, carrying souls skyward. The snakes as underworld guardians, the fox as trickster or guide. An entire theology etched into limestone, a liturgy in images for a people who had no script.
Their beliefs communicated through icon and gathering, through the resonance of stone and circle, through ritual we can only guess at. But here the mystery deepens, for after centuries of use, these people buried Göbekli Tepe deliberately, covering its monumental enclosures with tons of earth, entombing their own masterpiece, as if hiding it from later generations or retiring it after its purpose was fulfilled, leaving future millennia to stumble upon it half-buried, puzzled and awed. As though the builders whispered across time, "You were not meant to forget us." And yet, forget we did, for 10,000 years, until modern farmers struck their plows upon these stones, leading archaeologists to uncover the world's oldest known temple. Though even now, less than 1/10 of the site has been excavated, the rest still slumbers beneath the hill, holding secrets that might change everything again. Why bury such grandeur? Was it to protect sacred ground, to close a chapter of cosmic significance, or was it fear? Fear of powers unleashed, of rituals no longer safe, of gods too near, leading them to entomb the site as one seals away dangerous relics, not to preserve, but to suppress. Here speculation blooms. Some fringe voices see in Göbekli Tepe evidence of a lost advanced civilization, survivors of a cataclysm, perhaps the younger Dryas comet impact that ended the Ice Age, who encoded their knowledge in stone before fading from history.
The animal carvings not merely symbolic but astronomical, recording constellations, comet strikes, or celestial alignments meant as warnings to future humanity. And indeed, some researchers argue that the vulture stone depicts the sky as it was around 10,950 BCE, precisely the time of sudden climate collapse, as if Göbekli Tepe itself is a message in code, a memorial to catastrophe and survival, a cosmic time capsule left by ancestors whose identities we no longer know. But whether one accepts or rejects such ideas, the fact remains. Göbekli Tepe should not exist according to the tidy timelines of progress, and its presence forces us to confront the possibility that human history is older, stranger, more layered than we have been taught. Even its builders remain phantoms. No burials have been found, no houses, no villages nearby of scale to support such labor. Only scattered hearths and tools, leaving us to wonder whether Göbekli Tepe was constructed by a regional network of tribes converging seasonally in pilgrimage, or whether there was indeed an organized society, now erased, capable of mobilizing manpower for such monumental architecture. Their identity lost, yet their stones surviving as their only biography. And what of the rituals performed within these circles? Were they sacrifices beneath the watch of stone gods, feasts binding tribes together, ceremonies of initiation, or visions induced by trance, with animal spirits dancing upon fire-lit walls? In the absence of texts, we are left with the stones themselves, mute yet eloquent, hinting that these were not merely religious gatherings, but transformative acts, where humans stepped beyond survival and into meaning, where the sacred was carved into earth itself, where perhaps the very concept of civilization first germinated, not in fields of wheat, but in fields of faith. And here lies the most haunting possibility, that Göbekli Tepe is not only the world's first temple, but also the first graveyard of forgotten gods. That its deliberate burial marked the end of an age, the sailing away of beliefs too alien to survive into later mythologies, leaving us with echoes but not continuity, shadows but not names, a silence that forces us to imagine what we cannot know. And so Göbekli Tepe endures, a riddle in stone, older than memory, its circles gazing upward like open eyes, its faceless pillars demanding recognition yet withholding explanation, its mystery magnified by the fact that it should never have been possible, and yet there it stands, forcing us to reconsider who we were, what we believed, and how much we have forgotten, leaving us with a single enduring certainty, that the past is far stranger than the stories we tell, and somewhere in those buried stones lies a truth about ourselves we have not yet earned the right to understand.
The Sphinx of Giza, guardian of forgotten knowledge.
At the edge of the desert, where the plateau of Giza rises above the Nile's green lifeline, there sits a creature neither wholly man nor wholly beast, carved from the bedrock of time itself, a guardian whose face bears the calm of eternity and whose body stretches like a lion frozen in watchful repose. The Great Sphinx of Giza, the oldest and most enigmatic monument in Egypt, perhaps the world. A sentinel that has endured sandstorms, invasions, earthquakes, and centuries of neglect, yet still refuses to reveal its full story, as though it were less a statue than a question posed to humanity, a riddle carved in stone. The mainstream narrative tells us it was built around 2500 BCE during the reign of Pharaoh Khafre, its face meant to bear his likeness, its lion's body symbolizing royal power, its placement guarding the pyramid complex like a cosmic watchdog of resurrection. But this tale, though neat, frays quickly under scrutiny, for evidence is thin, the attribution based more on assumption than proof. And the Sphinx itself, weathered and scarred, seems to whisper an older truth, one that predates Khafre by centuries, perhaps millennia, a truth scholars debate yet cannot settle, leaving the Sphinx suspended between accepted history and forbidden possibilities. Its colossal scale alone inspires awe, 240 feet long, 66 feet high, carved from a single outcrop of limestone, as if the earth itself yielded its guardian to human hands. And yet, despite its size, the builders left no inscriptions to explain it, no text to declare its name or purpose, no ancient papyrus that says, "We built the Sphinx." It simply stands, anonymous, timeless, like a message without a sender. Some argue that this silence is deliberate, that the Sphinx was already ancient in Khafre's time, adopted rather than created, revered as a relic of forgotten ancestors, a monument from a civilization erased by flood or fire, a civilization whose memory was absorbed into myth as the first time, the age of gods, when sky and earth mingled, when knowledge flowed freely and was later lost, leaving behind only stone guardians to watch the ages pass. The most controversial clue lies in its weathering. Geologist Robert Schoch and others have pointed to the deep vertical fissures eroded into its body and enclosure walls. Not the horizontal striations of wind-blown sand, but the rounded patterns of heavy rainfall. Rainfall that has not touched the Giza Plateau since long before 2500 BCE, more likely between 7000 and 9000 BCE, when North Africa was a land of monsoons and rivers, suggesting the Sphinx may be twice as old as the pyramids, its original builders unknown, its face perhaps later recarved by dynastic Egyptians into the visage we now see. If this is true, then the Sphinx is not merely a monument, but a fossil of lost history, a silent witness from an epoch erased from official timelines, a guardian indeed, not of Khafre's tomb, but of human memory itself. Yet, even within accepted history, the Sphinx brims with riddles. Why is its head so disproportionately small compared to its massive body? A clue, some say, that it was recarved from an earlier lion-headed or jackal-headed statue, a cosmic beast later given a pharaoh's face. Its body leonine to mirror the constellation Leo and the dawn sky, aligning with the rising sun on the spring equinox around 10,500 BCE, a time some claim echoes in myths of Tepe, the first time of the gods, as though the Sphinx were not built for Khafre but for the stars, a stone star map linking earth and sky in a code we barely comprehend. And then there are the legends, whispered even by the ancients themselves. Thutmose IV, long after Khafre, claimed the Sphinx spoke to him in a dream, promising kingship if he cleared away the sands that had buried its body. And he commemorated this vision on the dream stele between its paws, a testament that even in antiquity, the Sphinx was already ancient, mysterious, regarded not as mere stone, but as a being with voice and will, a living guardian of hidden power. Medieval Arab historians wove tales of treasures stored within, chambers of wisdom sealed beneath its paws, while esoteric traditions from the Hermetica to modern mystics insist that beneath the Sphinx lies the Hall of Records, a library of lost Atlantis, containing the secrets of human origins, astronomy, and forgotten technology, placed there by survivors of a cataclysm so that when humanity was ready, it would awaken to its true history. For centuries, such claims were dismissed as legend. Yet, modern surveys with ground-penetrating radar have indeed revealed cavities beneath and around the Sphinx, unexplained voids that fuel speculation. Are they natural fissures or sealed chambers awaiting discovery? And if so, why do authorities hesitate to explore them? Why the reluctance to probe further, unless what lies within would overturn too much of what we think we know? Some say the Sphinx is aligned not merely with the pyramids, but with cosmic cycles, a celestial clock measuring precession, its lion's body pointing to the era of Leo when it was first carved, as if marking a beginning of ages, a reminder to future humanity of cycles of rise and fall, of floods and fire, of knowledge gained and lost, a marker not of tombs but of time itself. Others whisper of acoustic properties, of the enclosure acting as a resonant chamber, of the Sphinx humming with vibrations in certain winds, as though it were not only stone but instrument, attuned to frequencies we no longer hear, its silence only apparent, its true voice carried in harmonics of earth and sky. And yet, despite all these mysteries, the Sphinx gazes on impassive, its eyes eroded yet unblinking, its lips cracked yet sealed, its body patched by restorations across millennia, but its essence unbroken, a creature of endurance and enigma, simultaneously an artifact and a living myth. When one stands before it at dawn, as the first light crowns its head, one feels the weight of millennia pressing, a sense not merely of history but of timelessness, as though the Sphinx exists outside chronology, as though it has always been there, watching, waiting, guarding something we are not yet ready to know. Perhaps its true secret is not in hidden chambers or lost texts, but in its presence itself, a reminder that human history is deeper than memory, that civilizations rise and vanish, leaving whispers in stone, that guardians watch over thresholds we cannot yet cross. And so the Sphinx of Giza remains what it has always been, the eternal riddle, the guardian of forgotten knowledge, a question in limestone that no answer can fully silence, a sentinel whose silence is louder than any proclamation, a reminder that some truths are carved not to be explained, but to be wondered at forever.
The Baghdad Battery, ancient power source? In 1938, deep in the storerooms of the National Museum of Iraq, a German archaeologist named Wilhelm Koenig stumbled upon an unassuming clay jar, just 6 inches tall, capped with asphalt, its interior containing a rolled copper cylinder, and within that cylinder, a corroded iron rod, an arrangement so peculiar that when reconstructed, it looked less like a piece of pottery and more like a primitive galvanic cell. A simple battery. And with that realization, the world was confronted with a riddle that refuses to be solved. The so-called Baghdad Battery, an artifact 2 millennia old, discovered in the very cradle of civilization, a device that seems to whisper of knowledge out of time, of technologies forgotten or deliberately concealed, as if the past were not the age of ignorance we imagine, but a labyrinth of experiments whose results we can barely guess at. The jar itself, dated to between 150 BCE and 250 CE, belongs to the Parthian or early Sasanian period, an era rich in trade and cultural exchange. Yet no written records mention anything resembling electrical devices. No papyrus or tablet speaks of lightning captured in clay. And yet, when replicas of the jar were filled with an acidic solution, vinegar or lemon juice, they produced a small but measurable current, enough to shock the skin, to plate a thin layer of silver onto metal, to power the imagination into speculation. Had the ancients mastered electricity not as theory but as craft, using it not for light bulbs and wires, but for subtle arts,
playing jewelry with thin films of gold and silver, ritual electrotherapy, or even religious spectacle, making idols seem to glow or sting with divine presence, a technological trick to instill awe in the faithful. If so, then the Baghdad Battery is not merely an oddity, but a window into a lost chapter of human ingenuity, one that undermines our tidy progression of invention, reminding us that discovery is not always linear, but cyclical, that knowledge can appear, vanish, and reappear across centuries. Yet skeptics argue otherwise, that the jar was never a battery at all, but a simple storage vessel, perhaps for scrolls, perhaps for sacred papyri rolled and sealed against time, or a container for papyrus dipped in oils, and that its resemblance to a galvanic cell is coincidence, its supposed power an illusion projected by modern minds eager to see their own science in the relics of antiquity. But if that is true, why does the artifact's construction so neatly match the components of a cell? Why the asphalt seal? Why the copper tube? Why the iron rod? Unless some purpose bound them together. Even if accidental, the possibility remains that someone, at some point, noticed the tingle of current, the fizz of reaction, and harnessed it, however crudely, leaving no texts, but leaving devices. Jars, perhaps, scattered across Mesopotamia, each forgotten after their builders perished. If so, then the Baghdad Battery is not merely an oddity, but a window into a lost chapter of human ingenuity, one that undermines our tidy progression of invention, reminding us that discovery is not always linear but cyclical, that knowledge can appear, vanish, and reappear across centuries. Yet skeptics argue otherwise, that the jar was never a battery at all, but a simple storage vessel, perhaps for scrolls, perhaps for sacred papyri rolled and sealed against time, or a container for papyrus dipped in oils, and that its resemblance to a galvanic cell is coincidence, its supposed power an illusion projected by modern minds eager to see their own science in the relics of antiquity. But if that is true, why does the artifact's construction so neatly match the components of a cell? Why the asphalt seal? Why the copper tube? Why the iron rod? Unless some purpose bound them together. Even if accidental, the possibility remains that someone, at some point, noticed the tingle of current, the fizz of reaction, and harnessed it, however crudely, leaving no texts but leaving devices. Jars, perhaps, scattered across Mesopotamia, each forgotten after their builders perished.
And this is the deeper mystery. We have no context, no accompanying records, only the jars themselves, found in the ruins of Kujit Rabu near Baghdad. Their silence as haunting as the silence of the Indus script, their presence undeniable, yet their meaning elusive, forcing us to speculate in the dark. Some enthusiasts leap further, claiming the Baghdad Battery was part of a larger tradition of forgotten electricity, pointing to reports of ancient Egyptian reliefs that resemble light bulbs, or to tales of the Ark of the Covenant as a device capable of shocking those who touched it, a holy capacitor hidden in myth. All strands in a web of possibility that perhaps ancient civilizations knew more about natural forces than we allow. Knowledge later suppressed or lost amid wars, fires, and collapses, resurfacing only when the world was ready again. Others push the boundaries still further, weaving the Baghdad Battery into narratives of extraterrestrial contact, suggesting it was not a human invention at all, but a remnant of technology gifted or abandoned by visitors from beyond, simplified into ritual by cultures who half understood its function, a sacred object mistaken for divine rather than electrical. Yet even without aliens, the fact remains. The Baghdad Battery demonstrates that ancient peoples were not passive, not static, but endlessly curious, experimenters who could stumble upon principles we consider modern. Their genius obscured only because their writings did not survive. Their discoveries perhaps guarded as priestly secrets, used to dazzle, control, or heal. Imagine a temple where priests use jars filled with grape juice to charge tiny currents, touching the faithful with a rod that tingles like lightning, a sensation interpreted as divine favor.
Imagine artisans dipping bronze jewelry into acidic jars and withdrawing it coated in gleaming silver. The alchemy of gods explained only to initiates.
Imagine a world where such marvels were everyday wonders, yet so cloaked in secrecy that when their temples fell, their knowledge fell with them, their jars left behind as mute puzzles for future ages. The mystery is compounded by the deliberate burial of history itself. The original Baghdad battery, along with countless artifacts, was looted in 2003 during the chaos of war, vanishing into the black market, its fate uncertain, perhaps locked away in a private collection, perhaps destroyed, perhaps still hidden in crates. Its silence now doubled, not only by time, but by modern tragedy, so that we are left with replicas, photographs, and fragments, denied the chance to study the original with modern tools that might reveal its secrets. Some might say the artifact has been silenced again, its knowledge suppressed once more, as if history itself conspires to guard certain truths from us until we are ready, or until we demand too much. And so the Baghdad battery hovers between explanations. A galvanic cell before its time, or a mundane vessel misread. A hint of forgotten science, or a mirage created by modern longing. A toy, a tool, a trick, or a treasure. What makes it endure as mystery is not only what it might have been, but what it represents. The possibility that our ancestors were not as primitive as we imagine, that they too touched forces we think belong to modernity, that human curiosity has always pressed against the unknown, sometimes grasping fragments of truths only to lose them again in the tumbling cycles of history. Whether it was used to plate jewelry, to heal, to inspire awe, or to do nothing at all, the Baghdad battery remains a charged symbol, a vessel of possibility, a reminder that even the smallest jar can overturn centuries of certainty, and that sometimes the greatest mysteries lie not in colossal monuments, but in the humblest clay, whispering across time of sparks we may never see, but can only imagine. The Piri Reis map, charting the world before discovery. In 1929, during the routine cataloging of artifacts at Topkapi Palace in Istanbul, a fragment of parchment surfaced, delicate and faded, yet bearing coastlines that should have been impossible for its time. A world map drawn in 1513 by an Ottoman admiral named Piri ibn Haji Muhammad, known as Piri Reis, a seasoned navigator who stitched together the knowledge of sailors, scholars, and ancient sources, producing an image of the Earth that continues to defy explanation. For on this map appear outlines of South America rendered with startling accuracy decades before its coasts were fully explored. Hence of the Caribbean dotted with islands, and most troubling of all, the faint trace of an icy southern landmass where Antarctica lies hidden beneath its glacial shroud, drawn centuries before the continent was officially discovered in 1820. And if this were not perplexing enough, some scholars claim the Antarctic coastline is depicted not as it looks under ice, but as it would have appeared thousands of years earlier, free of its frozen cover, suggesting that the map either preserves knowledge from a civilization far older than recorded history, or reflects a surveying technique lost to time. Piri Reis himself confessed in the margin notes, scribbled in Ottoman Turkish upon the parchment, that his map was a compilation, derived not only from the latest voyages of Portuguese and Arab sailors, but also from 20 maps and mappe mundi, some drawn in the time of Alexander, including charts from the ancient Greeks and even one from Christopher Columbus, whose own maps remain lost. And here lies the mystery. For if Piri Reis truly drew upon sources stretching back to antiquity, then the accuracy of certain coastlines implies that ancient cartographers possessed a global knowledge that should have been beyond them, as if they sailed oceans we believe they never crossed, or inherited charts from still earlier ages, civilizations that predated the Greeks and Phoenicians, perhaps even cultures erased from the historical record, leaving only fragments encoded in maps that surfaced centuries later. Skeptics argue that the apparent accuracy is illusion, that the distortions of projection, the imaginative guesses of cartographers, and the selective eye of enthusiasts combine to exaggerate the map's precision. And indeed, much of the Piri-Reis map is crude, with distorted scales, missing continents, and fantastical creatures scribbled in the margins. Yet, amidst the fanciful, certain features remain too precise to dismiss, such as the placement of South America relative to Africa, or the uncanny resemblance of the southern coastline to parts of Queen Maud Land in Antarctica, a resemblance first noted by Charles Hapgood, the controversial historian who argued in the 20th century that the map preserved evidence of ancient seafaring civilizations with advanced geodesy capable of charting the Earth before the last ice age, their knowledge handed down through fragments that survived into the libraries of Alexandria and later into Arab and Ottoman collections, until Piri Reis copied them onto his gazelle skin parchment. Hapgood's theory inspired none other than Albert Einstein, who wrote a letter praising his boldness, though cautioning against certainty, for the implications were staggering. If true, it meant that humanity's story stretched back further than we admit, that civilizations with navigational and cartographic skills rivaling the 18th century may have flourished tens of thousands of years ago, only to vanish into myth. Critics counter that no ancient mariners could have mapped Antarctica, for the ice sheet has covered the land for millions of years, and that any resemblance is coincidence, a trick of the eye, an artifact of how the jagged coastlines were interpreted. Yet the persistence of the mystery remains, for how else could a 16th century Ottoman admiral sketch lands unknown to his contemporaries with such confidence? The parchment itself, preserved in fragments, has been studied with care. Its ink consistent with the early 1500s, its style a blend of Islamic cartography and European nautical charts, its content littered with sea monsters, ships, and notes in Piri Reis's own hand. Yet the true origins of its most tantalizing features, the Antarctic-like coast, the accuracy of South America, cannot be pinned to any known source, raising the possibility that Piri Reis had access to documents since lost, charts that survived the burning of Alexandria or the fall of Constantinople, documents whose provenance stretches back into prehistory. Imagine for a moment a forgotten mariner of the ancient world, steering across vast oceans with instruments now unknown, mapping continents by the stars, and leaving records that drifted through time, copied and recopied until fragments of his work found their way into Piri Reis's library. Imagine, too, the possibility that such maps were regarded as sacred, hidden from the uninitiated, guarded by secret orders or priestly castes who recognized their power, until finally they were lost to fire, conquest, and decay, leaving behind only a handful of enigmatic traces. The Piri Reis map has therefore become more than a chart. It has become a symbol, seized upon by theorists of lost civilizations, by proponents of Atlantis, by advocates of alternative history who argue that we are but the heirs of forgotten ancestors who sailed seas long before the age of discovery, their wisdom erased but not entirely. And yet, the map also speaks to the fragility of knowledge, how easily records are destroyed, how much depends on accidents of preservation. For we have only a fragment of Piri Reis's world map, 1/3 at most, the rest lost to time, perhaps forever, and with it the full extent of what he recorded, what coasts and continents he sketched, what sources he cited. In this way, the map becomes a metaphor, a window half-shuttered, offering a glimpse of a world that might have been, daring us to wonder whether our history is truly complete. Was Piri Reis merely a diligent compiler of sailors' tales and conjectures, or was he, unwittingly, the last custodian of a knowledge chain stretching back into prehistory? Was his map simply another artifact of the Renaissance, or a relic pointing to civilizations erased, whose ships once traced coastlines beneath the southern stars? The enigma persists, and with each debate, each hypothesis, the Piri Reis map retains its power, a piece of gazelle skin inked with secrets that challenge the boundaries of history, reminding us that discovery is never final, that the world has always been bigger, older, and stranger than we imagine, and that sometimes a single map can redraw not only coastlines, but the entire story of human civilization.
Ooparts, artifacts that shouldn't exist. Scattered across the world, tucked into layers of rock, buried in forgotten tombs, unearthed in mines and riverbeds, lie objects that by all logic should not exist. Strange anomalies known as Ooparts, out-of-place artifacts that mock our timelines, sneer at our neat chronologies, and whisper that human history is not the straight, steady ascent we pretend it to be, but a puzzle with missing pieces, fragments that seem to hint at lost chapters of technology, craft, or even civilizations that official history denies. Yet these objects remain, heavy, tangible, undeniable, each one a riddle that scholars struggle to explain. Consider the Antikythera mechanism, a clockwork computer of bronze gears dredged from the seabed in Greece, centuries ahead of its time. Though now studied and marveled at, it is in essence an Oopart, for no other device like it appears in the historical record until 1,000 years later, making it as anomalous as if a wristwatch were found in a pharaoh's tomb. Or consider the Iron Pillar of Delhi, standing rust-free for over 1,600 years in the humid air of India, its metallurgical perfection baffling experts who cannot replicate its corrosion resistance even with modern processes, as if the smiths who forged it knew secrets of chemistry long lost. Then there are the Klerksdorp spheres, tiny metal objects perfectly round with grooves etched around them, found in South African rock deposits dated to nearly 3 billion years old, long before humans walked the earth. Yet they lie embedded in stone, uncracked, enigmatic, some insisting they are natural formations, others swearing they bear the fingerprints of intelligence. In a coal seam in Wilburton, Oklahoma, miners discovered an iron pot encased in 300-million-year-old rock. In Russia, geologists unearthed aluminum gears embedded in 300-million-year-old shale. In Siberia, titanium springs, coils, and screws turned up in permafrost estimated to be over 20,000 years old, objects of industry in ages when no industry should have existed. Skeptics call these hoaxes or misinterpretations, coincidences of geology and mineralization. Yet the persistence of such finds over centuries suggests something more unsettling, that perhaps we do not fully understand the depth of time or the cycles of civilization, that perhaps what we call prehistory is not empty but layered with forgotten rises and catastrophic falls, each leaving behind only fragments too advanced for their strata. Imagine if humanity were not the first species to harness tools, if intelligence rose and fell like tides, each wave erasing its predecessor, leaving only artifacts buried far below, objects that puzzle us today precisely because we have no framework in which to place them.
The Ooparts include maps as well, the Piri Reis map among them, as well as the Sphinx map of 1531, which shows Antarctica centuries before its discovery. Its contour is oddly accurate, as if copied from ancient surveys. And the mysterious King's map of China, with coastlines that defy known exploration. Each one a paper Oopart, hinting at global navigation before Columbus, before Zheng He, before any we acknowledge. Then there are the crystal skulls of Mesoamerica, carved with such precision that even modern diamond-tip tools struggle to reproduce them. Yet said to be pre-Columbian, their origins cloaked in myth, some declaring them sacred relics, others modern forgeries. But if even one is authentic, it rewrites the capabilities of ancient artisans. Consider, too, the Baghdad battery, another Oopart we have already explored. A clay jar that hums with potential electricity in an age that should have known nothing of galvanizing. Or the Saqqara bird, a small wooden artifact shaped like a bird yet oddly aerodynamic, found in an Egyptian tomb, its form resembling a glider more than a toy, leading some to claim that ancient Egyptians experimented with flight, or at least dreamed of it more concretely than we thought. There are legends of tools found embedded in coal seams, hammers of iron locked within rock layers millions of years old, and of footprints, human-like, imprinted alongside those of dinosaurs, reported in Texas riverbeds, though dismissed as hoaxes by most scientists, yet they continue to stir whispers that our kind has walked this earth far longer than textbooks allow. For every Oopart explained away as fraud, another arises that resists explanation, as if history itself is dropping breadcrumbs, daring us to consider that our narrative is incomplete. The very term Oopart divides scholars and dreamers. For while mainstream archaeology seeks order and continuity, these artifacts thrive in disruption, their existence cherished by fringe historians who weave them into tales of Atlantis, of extraterrestrial visitors, of ancient cataclysms that wiped out high civilizations and left survivors to scatter knowledge piecemeal across the globe. What if, for example, the survivors of such a catastrophe, say the end of the Ice Age or the Younger Dryas impact, carried fragments of their technology into new lands, inspiring myths of gods, seeding inventions that appeared too soon before vanishing back into obscurity? The myths of golden ages, of ages of fire and flood, might not be mere allegory, but cultural memory of civilizations long lost, their remnants mistaken for divine gifts. Even modern technology offers eerie parallels. What would happen if our own world collapsed? If our skyscrapers and satellites were reduced to rubble, our plastics and alloys eroded into fragments, and only a few scattered survivors remained to start again? Millennia later, might their descendants stumble upon a titanium spring buried in stone, an aluminum shard in a fossil bed, and wonder how such things could exist in a world where no record explained them? Would they call them Ooparts, anomalies of their own lost history? Perhaps that is what we face now, inheritors of a cycle we barely remember, with Ooparts as the only surviving clues. The allure of Ooparts lies not in their proof, most are ambiguous, contested, or suspect, but in their possibility, their suggestion that history is far stranger than we allow, that the timeline we cling to is not absolute but fragile, vulnerable to overturning by a single undeniable find. Each Oopart is like a crack in the facade of certainty, a glimpse into a corridor we have not walked, where civilizations rise in silence and fall into myth, leaving behind artifacts that should not be, artifacts that shout against the silence. We were here, we knew more, we reached further, and we too were forgotten. Until we resolve them, until we face what they might mean, the Ooparts will continue to haunt us, tangible echoes of stories we do not yet dare to tell.
The Tunguska event, explosion without a trace. On the morning of June 30, 1908, as the sun crept over the endless taiga of central Siberia, the stillness of the wilderness was shattered by a blast so immense that it leveled an estimated 80 million trees across more than 2,000 square kilometers of forest, flattening them in a radial pattern as though some unseen giant had pressed its hand upon the earth. Reindeer herds were incinerated in an instant. Nomadic Evenki hunters were hurled from their tents. Windows shattered hundreds of miles away. Shock waves circled the globe twice. And yet, when scientists finally arrived years later, they found no impact crater, no fragment of a meteorite, no definitive evidence of what could have unleashed the greatest explosion in recorded human history prior to nuclear weapons. An event whose force has been calculated at 15 megatons, nearly 1,000 times the bomb that leveled Hiroshima, an energy unleashed without a trace. The Tunguska event has since become one of the most tantalizing enigmas in modern history, a mystery that refuses to be contained by simple answers. For even the most rational explanations stumble before the eerie absence of a physical body, a scar in the earth, or any conclusive remains. For decades, the dominant theory has been that a stony asteroid or icy comet, roughly 50 to 60 meters in diameter, entered Earth's atmosphere at incredible speed, disintegrating in a fiery airburst some 5 to 10 kilometers above the ground,
The shock wave and thermal radiation vaporizing itself before reaching the surface, its fragments scattered too widely or too completely destroyed to leave behind recognizable evidence. And yet, while this hypothesis explains much, the flattened trees, the eyewitness accounts of a fireball streaking across the sky, the shock wave that registered on barometers in Europe, it fails to explain everything. For in the very heart of the devastation, the trees were not flattened but stood upright, scorched yet still rooted, as though a beam of energy had descended vertically upon them, leaving them blackened yet eerily intact, a detail that haunts those who seek simple answers. Eyewitnesses among the Evenki described the sky splitting apart, fire raining down, a column of bluish light brighter than the sun, and a deafening roar that shook the earth.
One man was thrown across the ground as if by invisible hands, his clothing aflame, while others miles away spoke of a fiery sphere crossing the heavens, trailing sparks, and then an explosion like the heavens themselves breaking open. For weeks afterward, the night skies of Europe glowed strangely bright, luminescent clouds of silver and pink visible even at midnight, so that Londoners claimed they could read newspapers outdoors at night without lanterns, a phenomenon attributed to particles hurled into the upper atmosphere. Yet such global after-effects only deepen the aura of mystery. When Leonid Kulik, the first scientist to mount an expedition in 1927, reached the site, he expected to find a crater, a great gouge in the earth, perhaps a buried fragment of an iron meteorite. Instead, he found only miles upon miles of blasted trees lying like matchsticks, all pointing outward from a central point of destruction, as though some invisible bomb had detonated above them. He collected stories from locals who spoke of thunder louder than cannon fire, of the ground trembling, of fiery winds, of animals scorched alive. But he found no meteoritic iron, no stone fragments, nothing he could carry back to prove the culprit. Kulik, undeterred, theorized that the meteorite must have vaporized upon impact with the swampy ground, leaving no trace but the devastation. But later expeditions found no crater beneath the bog, no hidden core, nothing but peat and silence. As decades passed, the theories multiplied like shadows in the twilight. Some suggested that a comet composed of volatile ice had disintegrated completely in the atmosphere, leaving no fragments. Others speculated about a natural release of methane from the Siberian permafrost, ignited by a lightning strike into a cataclysmic explosion. Still others saw in Tunguska the fingerprints of the extraordinary, an alien spacecraft self-destructing in the skies, a weapon test from a lost civilization, even a miniature black hole passing through the Earth, entering in Siberia and exiting somewhere in the Atlantic. Each theory carries its own strange allure, for in the absence of physical proof, the imagination runs rampant, and Tunguska, with its enormity and its emptiness, invites speculation like no other event. Consider the strangeness. An explosion equal to thousands of Hiroshima bombs, yet no crater, no fragments, no dead cities, only a wilderness shaken into silence. An event whose shock waves were recorded in Britain, yet whose epicenter remained unvisited by science for nearly 2 decades, shrouded in remoteness, its mystery deepening with each year of neglect. Even today, over a century later, the Tunguska event remains elusive, for while computer simulations support the airburst theory, no one has conclusively recovered a piece of the supposed meteorite. No smoking gun has been displayed in a museum, and without such proof, the event lingers between science and myth. To the Evenki people, the blast was a punishment from the god Ogdi, who struck down the forest with fire. To ufologists, it was a spacecraft's desperate crash landing. To catastrophists, it is a reminder that the Earth is vulnerable to cosmic impacts far more frequent than we dare admit. And perhaps that is why Tunguska unsettles us so deeply, not merely because of what happened, but because of what it means, that the Earth can be struck without warning, obliterated without explanation, and leave behind only silence, that our illusion of control is fragile, that we are but inhabitants of a planet adrift in a cosmic shooting gallery.
Yet, like so many enigmas, Tunguska resists closure. New expeditions as recently as the 21st century continue to study tree rings, soil samples, microspherules of silicate and nickel, tiny clues pointing to a cosmic origin. Yet even these do not satisfy the hunger for certainty, for the absence of a crater remains, a void that no theory can quite fill. The Tunguska event thus endures as a scar not just on the Siberian forest, but on human knowledge, a reminder that the world still holds mysteries vast enough to humble us, that even in the modern age of science and satellites, the sky can still unleash wonders we cannot fully explain. Was it an asteroid, a comet, a natural explosion, or something beyond? We may never know, for the earth has swallowed its secrets, the taiga has grown back, the trees now whisper where once they lay prostrate, and only the silence remains, an echo of the morning when the sky split open and fire descended, an explosion without a trace, a mystery without an answer, an enigma that changed our understanding of fragility forever.